Thank you, everybody, for attending today's Lehigh County Authority Board of Directors meeting of August 22nd, 2022. Meeting is being recorded, being held virtually as well as in present in our boardroom. Make sure that you can hear us and be heard. All right, we're going to start off with a roll call of board members present.
Brian Nagel.
Here.
Scott Bieber.
Here.
Richard Bonner.
Here.
Norma Cusick. Ted Lyons.
Here.
Kevin Baker. Linda Rosenfeld.
Here.
Jeff Morgan.
Here.
Amir Famili.
Yes.
All right, we have 7 board members present. That is a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Our packages were delivered to us, or at least mailed out to us. Hard copy as well as made available email and is available online. Did anybody not receive their packages? All right, moving on then. Review of the agenda and any need for executive sessions.
All right, so for today, we have no changes to the recommended changes to the agenda, but we have requested an executive session following the close of this meeting for matters of personnel.
All right, thank you. We now move on to approval of the minutes from the August 8th, 2022 board meeting.
I'll make a recommendation that we accept the minutes that published for the August 8th, 2022 meeting.
Second.
All right, motion made and seconded. Are there any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Going on to,
We had 3 abstentions.
I'm playing golf together.
Okay.
Was a ritual golf.
All right, thank you. Motion passed. All right. This time we open the floor to any public who have any comments about non-agenda items. Are there any comments?
No, thank you, Brian.
No, thank you, Brian.
Brian?
Yeah, I have a comment, a question. Lisa, you had sent out a bunch of stuff. This is probably the wrong time to do this about privatization of water systems. I missed last weekend. Perhaps you talked about it last week, excuse me, 2 weeks ago. I can't recall. But at some point, I think it might be interesting to talk about that.
Sure.
For the good of the ordinance.
Yeah, but we could add that as an agenda item for a future meeting, if that makes sense.
Let's do that at a future meeting.
Yeah.
In fact, may I add also, I would like to see, I've always thought about this on the agenda at the end of our meetings. I think we should put an item for the good of the order or something like that. Make that a good item right at the end of the meeting.
Right.
Okay, no business.
Well, okay,
Well,
well,
let's think about it. I'll talk to you afterwards about what your intentions are and so we can add that on as a standing agenda item.
okay,
All right.
thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, we move on to action discussion items. We have one under finance and administration. It's the LCA tapping fee policy update and suburban water division tapping fees. Seeking approval, it is the TAN documents in our board package and is digital board package pages 6 through 114. Big pile.
Yeah, so this is a pretty hefty packet. Hopefully we can walk through it somewhat simplified way. I also would like to introduce Dave Bush from Keystone Alliance Consulting. He's on the call with us to help us understand anything that we're we're talking about here. Like just to give you an overview, all of these documents are interrelated. Yes, sir.
Just want to note that Kevin has joined me.
Awesome. Hi, Kevin. So this started really last year. Maybe
This has
2
been
years.
going on 2 years.
It's been going on for a little while.
Actually, in some way, shape or form between myself and Dave, probably back to somewhere in the middle of the pandemic and it kind of went full circle into back looking at the policies. And that's kind of what she's got set right now is to look at the policies and the things that we're driving, what we got hung up on?
So I received back in June, the water report for the tapping fees that Dave calculated. And if you recall, we had provided that to you. We were going to ask you to approve them. But as I started looking through it in a little more detail and seeing what the effect of the fees were, I started asking some questions about why we were seeing the change in the fees, and then also digging into our policies and what it looks like in our published rate schedule to customers or to prospective customers. And began to realize that there were some things in our policies that may not reflect how they should be done, and also may not reflect how we're actually doing them. So, and it all relates to how developer built systems are handled. So throughout our suburban division, especially, we have a lot of development happening where developer buys a vacant piece of property, builds the infrastructure, and then dedicates it to the authority afterward, and then connects all the homes to the water system. And there's a provision within the tapping fee legislation that allows for reimbursement of some tapping fees to the developer for certain kinds of connections to developer contributed assets. And we came to realize that our interpretation of that was maybe not totally correct. And so we had included certain assets into the calculation previously that allowed reimbursements to happen that maybe weren't supposed to happen. And without getting into all the details of the various agreements, with Dave's look at the costs and doing the calculation according to the tapping fee legislation, which excludes developer contributed assets, that's why we see this big change in the rates. And we needed our policies to reflect the correct method of doing reimbursements. So what we have before you is a series of policies that date back to the 90s in some cases, with some changes that were reflective of our review as well as Dave's review, and Mike Gall also took a look at them. And then with those policy changes, we also get to the updated rate calculation for suburban water. So
There's a question.
Yes.
The last time the rate structure was set up was 10 years ago.
2012, yeah.
Okay. And there was additional legislation that was adopted in between
No.
there? Or?
No, this is kind of I'll put it in the category of knowledge capture, knowledge management. The rates had been done historically by prior staff members using spreadsheets and formulas that we couldn't really easily break apart and get to the same numbers. So we turned all of our asset data over to Dave Bush and said, Dave Bush is the expert in this area. Let's see what he comes up with in terms of the fee calculation. And he's got like a standardized way that he does it. He's been doing it that way for us for the wastewater side for several years now. And that's how he was able to uncover some of the differences in the fees and how they're supposed to be calculated. So we haven't been able to go back at the old spreadsheets and really hone in on exactly every penny of difference, but we definitely saw the big differences in how contributed assets were dealt with, as well as reimbursements to developers. So we stopped doing reimbursements, but didn't make the change to how the fee was calculated, if that makes sense.
Would you, at the risk of getting into the weeds of this,
Mhm.
could you give us an example of what you're talking about?
Sure.
Developer buys a piece of land, puts a bunch of homes on it.
Yeah.
Take it from there.
Okay, so let's say a developer buys piece of land and has to extend water from where our current water system is to the edge of the property where the development is going to be. That extension, it potentially could have.
So there's no water into that parcel.
That's what I'm talking about. So the extension of water from our system to the development is one kind of extension. And then the construction of the system within the development is a different kind of contribution. So for the system that exists within the development that the new homes are all going to connect to, those are contributed assets that should be removed from the calculation because LCA didn't pay to install them. However, the section of the line that goes from our current system to the line of the development, potentially there could be other connections to that line that the developer could be do some contribution or reimbursement for. So it's really kind of creating a break between what's inside the development and what infrastructure leads to the development.
In both cases, the developer is paying for the extension from our system and also the lines in the development itself. I know we've had some where we had
Yeah.
a joint payment of the extension, but
Yeah, so they're
generally,
speaking, yes, and that's where the other policies come from, where we talk about the main extension policy and our contribution to that. So, for example, if the developer really only needed an 8-inch line to serve his or her development, but we said for greater redundancy or looping of the system or whatever the case may be, we want that pipe to be a 12-inch pipe, we would contribute some portion of the cost to upsize that line. And there's a variety of different things that we might contribute to as laid out in the policies. Chuck and his group deal with that on a day-to-day basis as new developments happen. So, does that help a little bit?
Yeah, then all these fees depend on the size of the line, and so we see all these lists and so forth.
Just so we're clear, this is suburban water only.
Correct.
Nothing else,
Right.
right?
Right, so this is the suburban water system is really where this contribution piece comes into play more so than anywhere else, because suburban sewer is just the interceptors and some small areas that aren't growing, and the city system is a totally different structure. So Dave, I kind of gave a simplistic view of kind of the breakdown between the different parts of the infrastructure. Did you want to add or clarify or correct me on anything so far?
The one thing that I would suggest is really comes into play when developer 2 comes along, not the original developer who built the asset, but when another developer comes along and he's going to build a subdivision connecting to the line that was constructed by developer 1. Developer 1 is the individual who's eligible to get reimbursed because developer 2 is benefiting from what he constructed. So all this needs to be set up in advance through a reimbursement component, through a reimbursement agreement. And there was an attempt to do that previously, but I think the way we're approaching it now is much improved and will benefit the authority and also keep you out of court, which is of critical importance.
I think what Dave is, that's a great example, Dave, and what he's alluding to is we were trying to capture all of that in the prior fee and the fee structure with, if you look at some of the changes to the policy, we had distribution part 1 and distribution part 2. And if this happens, this person gets to reimburse and all these different things, really confusing and ultimately not truly accurate in terms of how the fee should be calculated. So moving forward, what we would want to do and what we've reflected in the policies is if there is the potential for reimbursements from developer 1 to developer 2 in Dave's example, then that would require a special agreement relating to that reimbursement that conforms with the terms of the Municipal Authorities Act. And that is separate from what the board adopts. It's really a by formula specific agreement with that developer in the event that new connections happen to that line. Make sense? Okay, so let me just walk through what we have. And Mr. Chairman, it's really your call how you would want to break this up or do it all together or what have you. We really have two main components. We have the policy piece and then we have the fee piece. So going through the policies, the biggest change was to the tapping fee policy. And I provided them to you in two formats, one with the red line, so you can see what was changed. There's a lot of red marks on that document. So exhibit 2 is the clean copy with just everything consolidated. So, yes, sir.
One comment I'd like to make in advance is that we should have each of these, as kind of Jeff just alluded to, each one, they should really say suburban on it. When you get to exhibit 1, it doesn't mention suburban. You can gather that later on, but each of these exhibits should have suburban in the Lehigh County Authority suburban division. I think.
Yeah, I would say that the policies are not specific to suburban, but the fees are.
Okay,
So we don't really have development happening where there would be reimbursement in the city or on the sewer side, but if that situation would happen, these
they would
policies
apply.
would apply.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So then maybe we identify that could apply to each one, not just general. Just trying to keep it clean because no, just trying to keep it clean.
Right, and that was our intention by not specifying anything. This is the authority policy for tapping fees. And the tapping fee policy does capture both water and sewer components. So the capacity fee, collection fee is for sewer, distribution fee is for water. Special purpose fee that could be for either sewer or water, or reimbursement part that could be for either sewer or water, depending on the circumstance. So,
Okay.
okay.
All right.
We're talking about it in terms of suburban water because that's where we see the reimbursements happening. That's the major change in the policy is how we're talking about reimbursements to developers. So if you look at the red line of that policy, you'll see most of those changes have to do with how we define the different fees and specifically talking about how we handle the reimbursements. There's a rewritten section related to reimbursement. And the requirements for the reimbursement fee are spelled out in the Municipal Authorities Act. So this conforms with.
What is the Municipal Authorities Act?
That is our parent document. So the Pennsylvania Municipality Authorities Act was enacted in the 1940s. Is that right, Dave? You're even more of the expert on this.
The original one here, 1945.
Yeah, and it specifies the powers and purposes of an authority and the ways that we do things like set rates and. Yeah. So the tapping fee policy is the big one that changed. That's exhibits 1 and 2. Exhibit 3 is just an artifact that we found in our files. This is a scanned file of a 1992 distribution fee report. We could not find the original document. So if you look at the scan, some of the pages have some weird formatting on them. We could not find the original source document. But we found in the minutes from 1992 that the board officially did accept this report. It is no longer valid. And, the distribution or reimbursement period for any development is maximum of 10 years. So this is really a sunsetted report, has no bearing, but we thought since the board officially accepted it, we should officially unaccept it. Yes. And then the main extension policy is the one I had mentioned before that Capital Works uses a lot for new developments to kind of specify how the water mains are extended to serve a development and any contribution that LCA is going to make. There's just a couple of minor changes relating to or referring to the tapping fee policy that we wanted to clean up in that document. Dave, anything you want to say about the policy? Dave did a really thorough review of these for us, and Mike, of course, looked at them as well. If you have anything, Mike.
I think the revisions to the policies are put you in good shape. Most authorities don't have policies like this, and I think it's very helpful that you do, considering the complexity of your system. So I think it's very helpful that these have been updated and now adhere to all of the requirements of the Municipal Authorities Act and the goals of the authority.
Question, has this been an issue with developers? Is there a lot of haggling going on here? Or is it pretty much been free?
Yeah, I think where we have the most developer activity, and Chuck, if you have any other examples as well, I know it's been more related to a specific development and let's say a pump station that needs to be built and how we might share cost of a pump station if it's going to serve more than that development. So like the Kohler Track, that project was one where we had to negotiate a little bit and figure out the formula for how we're sharing costs.
And we had an upsizing there as well,
Mhm.
because it benefits our system. So yeah, that was a complicated board authorization. I think there were like 5 or 6 provisions to it. But we deal with individual requests for main extension. If somebody wants service and they're beyond the limit of our system, you know, we tell them what cost they would be responsible for, and they make a decision if it's worth their while to connect.
So those are the policies.
Okay.
And then we have the resolution and the suburban water fees. As you recall from the prior meetings, tapping fees are required to be adopted by resolution. So we have resolution 8-2022-1 and a very lengthy presentation by Dave Bush with all the calculations that went into putting the water fees together. The water fees are summarized. Looks like on page 7 of the report. What I did want to mention, a major component of our calculation, what we wanted to achieve was to consolidate the fee for all of our systems to create more of a common connection fee. So if you look at the table on that page, it shows all the different small systems that we have and what the old fee was from 2012. And the new fee is the same for all systems. So we consolidated the assets into a single calculation with one exception, which is the Arcadia division. And that was kept separate because we have some special services that we provide there in the form of special fire protection service in that system. So thought that by consolidating them, these systems are all on common rates now for the user charges. Every customer and every system pays the same rate. And we thought the connection fees should be consolidated as well. So it's simpler for the customer, simpler for LCA to manage. And you know, moving forward, the calculation can be simplified as well.
I see some of these changes are rather dramatic.
Right.
And this was arrived at by literally doing a cost analysis of what it really takes to.
Dave, do you want to just explain for the board kind of the overall basis for the tapping fee? I can do it, but you can do it better.
Well, thank you. Tapping fees are basically a buy-in contribution by those connecting to your system. So they're for new customers only. The intention is that they are buying into your system that is also already been being paid for by all of your existing customers. The process of calculating a tapping fee is covered under the Municipal Authorities Act, and we are required to follow that process in order to come up with an appropriate fee. The fee that we are calculating is actually the maximum allowable fee. You can't exceed that calculated amount by a penny. You may adopt a fee that is less than that if you would choose, though honestly, I personally don't believe there's any sense in doing that. But what you are doing is you're taking the authority's paid amount toward all of these assets, dividing it by, in simple terms, the capacity of the system to come up with a cost per gallon. And then that cost per gallon is ultimately converted to an EDU amount to be charged to individual customers connecting to your system. So they each pay their fair share based upon the capacity that they are going to take up in your system.
So it's based on the actual cost to have constructed the system in simple terms, but I mean, there's lots of parts to it. It's not a calculation of the future costs, it's it's calculation of the actual cost divided by the capacity of the system.
This will be my last question before I get shot. Of course, the system was put in 30 years ago. So is it based on that cost?
The cost can be calculated in a couple different methods. There's an original cost approach whereby you would be using that cost from 30 years ago, or a trended cost approach. We went through the process. Typically, we go through the process using both approaches and choose whichever one calculates out the highest fee. Okay, that trended cost takes that cost from 30 years ago and trends it to present dollars and utilizes that fee or utilizes those figures.
Thank you. I'm finished. Complicated.
Well, Lisa, let me follow up. I don't know if we're at the end of this discussion, but before we go on to the resolution, the main policy extension, I was just reading through that. And my question doesn't have to deal with the few changes in reimbursement. It has to deal with an issue that I think has nagged some small-time developers over years, and that's paragraph 10. Why do we have paragraph 10 that deals with these real small, apparently it's a 3-lot subdivision on a corner lot? And then there's another one where it's a 1-lot subdivision. And we have a policy where we reimburse the person if the lot is less than 4 acres in size and it's on a corner lot. It says 2 existing public roads, so I got to figure that's a corner lot.
Scott, before you go any further, can you hone us in on what you're looking at?
Paragraph 10 on the main extension policy.
So it's exhibit 4.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
My main question is, what is the purpose of this language? Why are we singled out these particular special cases where we have apparently a corner property that's less than 4 acres in size and they're going to subdivide it into 3 lots or less? Very specific. And it provides that we in that particular case, the authority may provide some reimbursement. And then there's another one under section 10 dealing with a 1-lot subdivision with an existing house on it.
And then,
I'm just wondering why this section even exists. What is this? Why is this?
so this has obviously been in place for quite a long time. My understanding, and Chuck, again, jump in anywhere that you see fit, is that we wanted to have some different policy provisions for very, very small developments, so they're not so onerous for.
So not to what?
Not so onerous. That we're contributing a little more to help I call the onesie twosies to connect where it's a benefit to the community for them to be able to connect.
Yeah, I think the thinking was at the time when it was developed, to try to cite some non-typical instances and try to sort that out. But
And there's some benefit to say a property that's in the middle of a developed area, but they have a private well that if they want to connect to public water, there's some benefit to LCA to have them connected to public water and to make it a little easier for them through some support through the policy.
Yeah, okay, I just don't understand why it just isn't included, why those type of properties aren't just included under our general policy, why they're singled out. I mean, in particular, the one that has to do with a corner lot, it says, you know, it's less than 4 acres with a single family residential dwelling on at least 2 existing public roads, so that implies it's a corner lot, right? And under this policy, I believe we can make that owner run water main up both sides.
yeah, across the entire frontage, which would be both sides.
I know that has hurt some people in the past. This particular policy does small people sometimes do.
Sometimes, right, sometimes those provisions can be waived if we don't see a benefit to extending it around the corner. If there's no or little probability of extending that main in the future from that endpoint, and then we would just, we would have the option to waive that and just have the owner just extend it along one side.
Yeah, it's, I know, but it's just, I know that I think I would not be happy if I was a property owner and I was told I gotta extend main on both sides of my property so that a future development up the road can be serviced. I would feel that, I'll have to pay to extend the main, like at least one side of service me.
Yeah.
I think
Okay,
I think that's why it's there, though, to call it out as something we will to talk about and some different ways that we might look at it.
It just seemed like with such a narrow definition, it's 4 acres or less, 3 lots or less, has to be an existing house on the edges. I thought maybe it should, if we're gonna have such a policy, I thought maybe it should be a broader. More of these small situations.
How many cases we have had that apply to this so far? In history of the LC 1, 2.
The corner lot, I don't recall one in recent history.
We do have, I mean, on occasion, a fair number of small, like single homes or 2 homes, little subdivision of one property into 2. That kind of stuff happens more frequently now than it used to, and try to be at least aware of the burden on a small property or a small development like that, where we're trying to support them getting connected.
I guess my one last question in that relationship, suppose I'm a property owner and I meet all the requirements except I want to subdivide on 3 lots and I have existing house, but my land is 5 acres instead of 4. Now I would not qualify for this provision. Am I correct? I then fall under the general main extension policy.
Generally speaking, yeah. I think we have ultimately have the right to negotiate and to work with the developer on what they have going on. And I think that's fairly common.
And I guess this situation doesn't arise that often anyway, does it? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Continue.
Well, I'm done. So what I'm asking for, and however you want to put it together, is the policy updates and the rescission of the 1992 distribution fee report, as well as adoption of resolution 8-2022-1 for the suburban water tapping fees.
Okay.
All of those that are listed in the memorandum.
All right, let's do it by exhibit and make it pretty quick though on each one. Exhibit 2, you're looking for approval of the clean document. You don't have to worry about exhibit 1. That is reflected in straight line of exhibit 2. And exhibit 3, we do need to rescind that one. And exhibit 4, we need approval, a motion on that one. And then a motion on finally the resolution 8-2022-1. So let's give the motion on exhibit 2 tapping fee policy for approval.
So moved.
All right, Jeff got it. Second by Linda.
Yep.
All right. Any questions? We'll do it all in favor. Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, ayes have it. Moving on to exhibit 3. This is the motion to rescind this former policy. All right, Amir, motion by Amir, second by Scott. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion to rescind. Exhibit 4, main extension policy, and also a separate document called contribution policy.
It's an appendix to the main extension.
Appendix to it. Seeking a motion to approve exhibit 4, main extension policy and contribution policy.
So moved.
All right, You got Linda again on the motion. Second, Scott on the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any opposed? Ayes have it. Now we have resolution number 8, 2022-1, requesting approval. Resolution establishing the various components of Lehigh County Authority capital recovery fees to the various suburban division water systems.
So move.
Motion by Dick.
A second.
Joey Wall in a second. It's pretty close. Any questions on this one?
The only comment I have, I just hope, and I think this is true, that we have a customer, we can sit down and explain, more or less explain the logic behind all this. I trust that this is the case. So I'm sure it is. Thank you.
We have a much greater ability to do that now than I think we did previously.
Great. Wonderful.
A motion made and seconded. Any other questions? On a thing, we have these resolutions like, let's do voice vote on. the first.
Okay, great. So this is a voice vote on resolution 8-2022-1. Brian Noggle,
Yes,
Scott Bieber,
Yes.
Dick Bonner,
Yes.
Ted Lyons,
Yes.
Kevin Baker,
Yes.
Linda Rosenfeld,
Yes.
Tom Morgan,
Yes.
Mayor Tulley.
Yes.
That's 8 yeses. Thank you very much.
ayes have it. All right. There's a tower required on the front of the resolution, so.
So that was a very complicated set of comments and documents, and so I appreciate all the questions, and thank you, Dave.
Dave, thank you very much for your help on this and getting us squared away.
My pleasure. Thank you. I'll let you continue the rest of your meeting without me then.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
All right, next on the agenda is an item under water main replacement program cycle 7 and 8. Seeking approval is the blue documents in our board package, digital board package pages 115 to 118.
Yes, thanks, legal. Jason is going to present this. This is for the design of the next 2 miles of water main replacement in the city of Allentown. That will satisfy the lease requirements to the end of 2024. So this is for design phase for the next, what we call 2 cycles. We call each project the cycle. So this would be what we call cycle 7 and 8. So Jason's gonna discuss the details of the project for you.
Well, first off, quite impressive that we're at 7 and 8 now at this point. We've gotten through 6 cycles of water main replacements in Allentown. But to touch on the project overview, the operating standards of the lease agreement as amended in 2020 requires that LCA to replace approximately 4 miles of water main through 2021 through 2024. Approximately 1 mile water main replacements were completed in 2021 and 2022 so far. Cycles 7 and 8, as Chuck had mentioned, cover the remaining requirements up into 2024 to get our approximate 4 miles of water main replacement conducted within the city of Allentown. We've calculated just a little over 2 miles of water main replacement throughout that period of cycle 7 and 8 to include getting to an intersection so we can do allow for future connections and our continued work through the effort. Also included in the engineer scope is to conduct a prioritization assessment program and a 5-year plan of projected projects as required in the agreement. It's essential within the assessment program to have close coordination with the City of Allentown Public Works, Streets Department, along with other outside agencies and private utility companies such as UTI, try to coordinate our work as we go. Financial side of the project will be funded by LCA Allentown Division and has been approved by the City of Allentown as major capital improvement. This approval, as Chuck has made mention, in order to leverage continued continuity and efficiencies that resulted in successful prior water main replacement projects for LCA, we recommend retaining the services again at Fleming to provide design and pipe prioritization assessment program for cycle 7 and 8. Professional services to be provided and performed by Gannett would be to administer the pipe prioritization assessment program, prepare the pipe prioritization assessment report for the 5-year plan, coordinate with the city streets program, other city departments, outside agencies and utilities, prepare plans and specifications for segments of main to be replaced, prepare and obtain regulatory municipal permits as required, and provide bidding services for the projects. Provide some, some background with Gannett here. Gannett not only has done our cycles 1 through 6 design and construction related efforts, but they also have done our suburban division as well up to this point. Have provided an excellent background in design and coordination efforts, not only amongst our staff here internally, but externally with other agencies to provide a more well-rounded, put together package for these main replacement projects. In fact, Gannett Fleming this past year has revised their cost proposal to reflect these efficiencies that we now have done, working together with not only internal staff here, but also externally as well. Some of that you can see in the prioritization efforts that we've done. Our GIS work that we have internally here, again, was able to go back and revise their proposal and keep that down a little bit. So for the capital project authorization that we're seeking here is for the Allentown Division water main replacement project 7 and 8, which includes some staff time, engineering consultant Gannett Fleming, some contingencies in the amount of $395,830, and included, like I just had mentioned, was a professional service authorization to Gannett Fleming for $260,830. Anybody have any questions that I could help with?
Yeah, I have a question. You just negotiated with this one firm for this engineering work, I assume.
Correct.
Correct. And you base your analysis of their proposal on past work that was done. Where I'm driving this is, how do we know that this is a good number, a correct number, a spot on number if we have no competitive bids? Not that I'm suggesting we do this, but I'm just curious to our system of analysis here, how we know that $260,000 is the right number.
What we look at their cost per mile to do the design and prioritization, and based on past projects, like Jason said, that there was some negotiation here where they cut their price because we want to do more prioritization work in-house. So we feel we've got a really good price for 2 miles of pipe. We consider some value in staying with Gannett Fleming. Like Jason said, they've done all the prior Allentown project designs. They're very familiar with dealing with the city compliance office. We have a good working relationship established with the city and Gannett as a team. So we put a value on that. And for our suburban division, like Jason said, they did design and construction administration for all the prior cycles in suburban. We feel we get a good product, a timely delivery and responsiveness that is very professional. So we'd like to stay with them. And we do feel that the cost is within reason.
Yeah, I gather that. I'm not, again, criticizing at all. But it's just a question compared to what? I mean, how if you keep dancing with the same partner,
Yeah,
I think that he's a great, at some point,
I
how do we understand where I'm going?
I realize that, and we thought the same way, and that's why when we were approaching Gannett to ask for a proposal for these cycles, we did cut costs, given that there's a learning curve that's been established. They're familiar with the system, and we are taking on more of the prioritization efforts ourselves. So we feel there was an equitable negotiation.
Have you ever considered doing not a cost plus, but some type of we're gonna give you the project is gonna be $260,000, but we want to see, things go really, really well. Do you ever consider doing projects on that kind of basis where you stay with the same partner, but you require on their part some type of, they disclose the costs and so forth, so.
We haven't done that to date. That's something we can consider doing.
I don't know what other it is. I just, having been in the business and doing a lot of work with the same customer,
Yeah.
very often a customer says, listen, I'm glad to give you the work, but show me the goods, show me that we're being fair with everybody. And,
Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, just a comment.
Yeah.
I'm not disparaging the decision, just like.
And I know, like we used to have a designated water engineer. Now we typically have different firms for different disciplines. And there is, you do get comfortable sometimes, right? I mean, look at your insurance costs. You stay with the same firm, maybe you aren't getting the best value. I think we are getting a good value here, but your point is well taken.
Chuck, is this a lump sum proposal or is it basically time and materials?
It's lump sum.
Oh, it is lump sum.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I wanted to confirm.
Yeah, one thought, again, where we're going here is that stay with the same provider because they're good,
Yeah.
but you might do it and you do it not to exceed and time and material not to exceed. They show you their costs. For some reason, the project goes really well. That you share in the savings or.
Yeah, we do time and material projects as well, but for the water mains, we haven't to date, but that's something that we'll consider.
Thanks.
There's a professional services agreement with the consulting firm, I guess, right?
That's correct.
So, when we go out for construction bids.
Oh, I know that,
We have done time and materials for other engineering work as well. This is.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
I just had two questions. So where is this? You guys have an idea where the work's gonna be done at?
That we do not know. That's part of the program itself, the design and prioritization program. So they're gonna look at main break history, so on and so forth, to establish where we're going to be going.
Okay, I didn't know if you had some general area.
We do have like a 5-year look ahead, but it changes from year to year based on prior year breakage
Mhm.
history. But we do generally have a 5-year look ahead and we share that with the city.
That's correct.
And we get their approval on the prioritization step. That's like preliminary design. But so, yeah, there's a 5-year look ahead, but we're not sure if what cycle 7 was envisioned to be a year ago, if that's gonna look the same based on the breakages.
Okay, and then my second question, again, maybe I've never really paid attention to this, but so the staff time, and just as Ted was saying, not asking you to do anything extra, but do you guys actually track that or?
We
How do
do,
you-
we
you
can
do
track
it
it in
afterwards?
this. Yeah, and
Okay.
that's part of the submission to the city, post-construction, the
Okay.
major capital, the CCRC paperwork, that's all documented.
Okay, I'm just curious what that component. was.
Yes.
So, I mean,
Question.
it's always in there, but I didn't know like what actually is done with it after it's approved.
Oh, it's definitely tracked.
Okay, interesting.
Linda, you had a question?
Yeah. You just answered part of me with Jeff as to where the next round is going to be. Because especially in the West End right now, they are digging up the streets for gas lines. And I was wondering if they check with UGI and the contractors working with that, if any of those streets are set for the water main replacements also.
Right.
Because it would be a shame to dig up those streets twice, if that's the case.
Well, Linda, wonderful question, and that's part of our exhaustive effort that we do as far as the prioritization program goes. We're looking at other utility company work, not only with like a company like UGI, but also working with City of Allentown, their streets program, to see if there's any overlaps, and we may have a ranking water main that might be a little bit lower down the list, but a conjoined effort of work could be done to save some costs. Those will then get moved up into those sections. And We actually had areas like that in years gone by where we were able to coordinate efforts and work together and save quite an amount of money on these project work when it comes down time to construction effort.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Just a logistics question for me. When you say to an intersection, are you talking about before you get into the intersection, middle of the intersection, after the intersection? Avoid minimizing or
Right,
duplicating it.
that's a wonderful question. Depends on the intersection, so to speak, but typically we're going through the intersection, the way the city of Allentown's built. How they have their control valves in the intersection are at the return radiuses at the extent of those intersections. So we'll go through an intersection to get and establish a spot, so we can actually, in the future, if the main would need to be done on that next leg, we can easily have good four controllable valves to work with. So we can isolate that intersection, tie in between those valves and not leave a section of customers without water for a period of time.
Also takes care of two lanes of traffic being stopped as well.
That's exactly right.
All right. Okay, any other questions? Jenny, did you have any comments, or Brian?
I did, Brian, thank you. I just wanted to make a clarification if I could. It has to do with the memorandum. There's a subsection called financial saying that this has been approved by the city. Way we do the approval, the different cycles come up independently, so they haven't been approved per se, because we don't know where they're going to be yet, obviously. What we did approve is the overall concept in the 5-year master plan. So that would be a specific thing to say. It says major capital improvement. That's a defined term and would be the specific cycles which have not been approved yet. Would you agree with my clarification, Jason?
Sure, yes.
Do we need any word changes at all in the document?
I don't believe so. You can have the minutes reflect Jenny's comment.
Okay, why don't we do that? All right. Thank you, Jenny. Anything else?
No, I just want to celebrate the fact that the algorithm has been very beneficial, and we've also, LCA has taken steps to make sure that we're hitting all of the major segments of the city. So there's always something in the east side, west side, all around the town. We try to spread that out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Mr. Chairman, let me follow up on Jane's comment. I didn't know when to bring this up, but is it possible that the staff could prepare a map showing all the main extensions that we've done since this whole program started? I was curious to know, color coded, maybe like the first cycle would be in a certain color then, because I'm very curious to see where all this work is being done throughout the city.
Yeah, sure. I think that's something that's easily obtainable.
All right, be nice to see.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we could provide that actually when we come before you guys for construction phase approval. Why don't we have that as an exhibit, and then you can see, where this project is and where all prior.
We started with Linda's house and my house.
Well, now they're moving to Dick's house. So we'll have that.
Share the pain.
Thank you.
Okay, we have before us a request for the capital project authorization, design phase, and pipe prioritization assessment program cycle 7 and 8 for a total capital project authorization of $395,830, and including professional services authorization to Gannett Fleming Incorporated for $260,830. I have a motion to that extent.
So move.
Motion made by Ted,
I'll second.
seconded by Jeff. Any questions? All right, voice vote on this, please.
One second. So voice vote on approval for design phase of cycle 7 and 8 main replacement. Brian Noggle,
Yes.
Scott Bieber,
Yes.
Rick Bonner,
Yes.
Ted Lyons,
Yes.
Kevin Baker,
Yes.
Linda Rosenfeld,
Yes.
Morgan,
Yes.
Amir Famili.
Yes.
8 yes votes.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, we have financial review monthly report. It is
You ready, Ed?
digital package.
It was a good month. Yeah, certainly.
19 to 1:30. Within our board package.
All right, let me share screen and get Ed's presentation up and running.
Forecast variance is positive.
Just about.
Just one more.
It's steady though.
Yeah.
Presentation was posted to our website as well, so for public viewing after the meeting.
Okay, so we'll take a review of the financial results for July. We'll start with the month and head down from the income statement. As you can see, Suburban Water had positive numbers, so we had net income. Suburban Wastewater got a little bit negative, and City Division was positive, but overall LCA finished at $1.2 million positive net income. Concerning the forecast, we said that water in the city were going to be positive, and that wastewater was going to be on the negative side. So on a net basis, it was slightly positive after a couple pluses and minuses. But the good news is, compared to the month and forecast, all three funds are on a favorable basis in net income. So water's better, wastewater better, and City Division. So $507,000 positive variance to forecast on the net income statement for LCA. Cash flows, kind of the same thing. Suburban Water positive, wastewater negative, City Division positive overall, positive. Again, compared to forecast, we're across the board, Suburban Water, wastewater, and city, we are all showing positive variances on the cash flow basis. And overall, we're up by $418,000 to forecast. Debt service coverage ratios don't really mean because of the prorated stuff. So we'll talk about that in year to date. So looking at year to date now in net income, very similar to the month, water, city are on the positive side. In fact, a big number on all two of the positive funds. And actually wastewater was only down a little bit. And as you look at forecast variance, again, all three funds are better than forecast, and that left us on the positive side for LCA in total. Cash flows, it's almost like a repeating story. Water, Suburban Water and City Division on the positive side, wastewater on the negative side. But again, we thought wastewater would be negative year to date. So across the board, on cash flows, we're positive, and positive. So almost $637,000 of favorable variance to LCA. As you're looking at the debt service coverage ratios, we're 2.36 in water, 7.92 in wastewater, 2.17 in City Division. So obviously we are above the threshold of 1.20, and in all three cases, we're pretty much better than budget is or forecast as well. Just looking at where we think we're going to be in a full year basis. On the income side, we think we're going to be positive across all three funds. Of course, the budget was on the same basis, positive. And at this point in time, we think that we'll be better than budget on water, better than budget on city, down a little bit on suburban wastewater, mostly revenue driven. And total $1.2 million of favorable variance on total LCA. In terms of cash flows, again, repeating, $12.5 million, and that's a positive contribution from all three funds. Suburban Water will be favorable by 1.8, the wastewater minus 17. To be honest with you, that's climbed downward a little bit from almost $1 million that we were saying last month. And the City Division about 536,000 better. So altogether in cash flow, we think will be $2.3 million better than budget. Debt service coverage ratio, we're 2.14, 10.24, 1.92. Again, all above the threshold that we use at 1.20, and the only one that's shown us unfavorable variance is wastewater down less than point, so. Okay, looking at the funds now, income for the month on suburban water, we're up by 272,000, almost the same amount on the year-to-date basis. And income for the full year, we think will be better by 456,000. Just looking at the year-to-date net income variances, we got some help, $77,000 in operating revenue, got some help on operating expenses being lower, got some help on non-operating stuff of $3 million, and eroded a little bit by $6,000 of unfavorable variance on interest expense. So altogether 456,000, and it's all coming from operating revenues and lower expenses. Cash flows for the month up 277. Year to date, we're positive 548, and we think we'll be 1.8 better than budget for the year. Again, kind of cash from operations being on the higher side. We'll get some positive effect from CapEx being about $263,000 and not much in the other variants. So that's the two big drivers, cash from ops related to the net income and then lower CapEx. Okay. Debt service. We talked about this already, threshold of 1.20, and we're 2.36, so we're doing better. We're better against the budget, and we think we'll finish at 2.14, which leaves us in a better position with respect to both targets. Operating ratio at 1.39 is better than the budget target and also better than the internal target. We also think that finishing the year at 1.30 will leave us in the same position, better than both targets. Days cash on hand, we're at 227 against the target of 180, and actually we think that will climb a bit, so we'll be at 2.65 at the end of the year, so that'll be a nice cash position. Where we are with respect to operating revenues to forecast, we're just slightly above in terms of operating revenues compared to on operating expenses. We're down almost 3 points, so that's good. That's helped us. And year-to-date CapEx is 87 versus 100. What we think operating revenues will look like, we're up a little bit, and we think we'll finish just a little bit behind budget for the year, but not by much. In terms of operating expenses, we're about $200,000 lower, and we think we'll finish about $600,000 less than budget, so that will help. CapEx, we're 1.9 versus 2.1. We think we'll finish 4.6 versus 5.5. So that looks like it will come in a little bit lower than what we had budgeted for the year. Unrestricted cash balances were at $5.9 million. We thought we'd be at 5.3, so we're doing a little bit better by a little bit more than $500,000, and we think we're going to climb to 6.9. In terms of trends, the operating revenue went up a bit from last month, where we were at 1.3, we're now at 1.8. So obviously that pushed the trend line up a little bit. The trend line went from 1.3 to a little bit above 1.3, and compared to the beginning of the year, 1.2 versus 1.3, and going back all the way to July, we're doing well in terms of operating revenue with the 1.3 compared to 1.1. So I think that's a nice trend right there in terms of operating revenue. Operating expenses, not much difference between June and July in terms of actuals, didn't do much to the trend line. So the 997 is a little bit higher than the 953 that we started with. Inflation has impacted pretty much all the funds. And then as you're looking back into July of last year, we were at 941 versus 997, but all in all, pretty good trend right here in expenses. CapEx, we think we're going to be at 84% to budget for the year. Right now through July, we're at 34%. That's not far off from where we were a year ago at 36. And compared to the beginning of the we're at 84 and we have compared to 112 for December of last year. So I get sidetracked here in my thoughts. Okay, so suburban water look pretty good, to be honest with you. Wastewater, we're for the month on income up about 80,000. That equates to about 80,000 year to date. And for the full year, this is where we think will be a little bit lower, and that will be mostly driven by lower revenues. In terms of the year to date variance on net income, operating revenues are down by 57,000, but expenses are making up for it by being lower by 135. We got some non-operating that contributed maybe $4 minus $3 million or $2,000 in expenses. So you can see it's coming from operating revenues and operating expenses that's driving that favorable variance. Cash flows. $83,000 better for the month. Year to date, we're at 36,000. We think we're going to be 17,000 lower. And like I said, when we did this in the last month, that was almost $1 million negative. So we're making up some ground on forecast cash flows on the suburban wastewater side. Cash from operations is favorable. Debt service and financing was favorable. Where we were off a little bit on wastewater was on the CapEx side. We ended up being $144,000 higher than what we forecasted. And we're making up some of that through invested income. As we go through the numbers, you'll see, and if you remember, I talked about investing some money because we got higher rates. Well, that's the good news, is the penalty is the ratio of days cash on hand. So in terms of debt service coverage ratio, we're down a little bit to our budget target. We're obviously better than the internal target at 7.92. We think that will climb back up to 10.24, get us closer to the budget target. But all in all, at 7 something, there's nothing to be excited about on that. Year-to-date operating ratio, we're at 0.98. That's obviously lower than 1 internal and the 1.1 budget target for the year. However, that should climb up to 1.05 and get us closer to the budget target and over the internal target as well. Base cash on hand, we're at 123.1, got them invested balances that are now generating more income, and I'll probably keep it that way for a while. So the penalty will be, this won't look as good, but we'll have the money sitting in invested balances, and it's going to be earning at least better than we've budgeted and forecasted income. So lower than 180, but we think that will climb to 312.7 based on activity for the remainder of the year. Operating revenues to forecast, very close, 99, not too far off. Operating expenses, 99, again, that makes up for it. And year-to-date CapEx, well, this one's 7 points higher than the target of 100% on CapEx. Very close on operating revenues, and we think that we'll be close, but a little bit low compared to budget. On operating expenses, we're a little bit lower, and we think we'll finish lower, so that'll help offset some of the revenue variance. On the CapEx side, we're at 2.2. We think we're going to finish the year at 2.9. I'm sorry, 2.4 versus 2.9. And right now, in year to date so far, we're a little bit ahead of that. So that's going to shift a little bit, and we're not going to look as favorable as we get toward the end of the year. Unrestricted cash balances, 4.2, a little bit higher than the forecast. We think that'll climb to 10.7. Trends, the operating revenues went from 1280 to 936. We saw a little bit lower revenues across both the municipal and the commercial realm. In terms of the trend, so that dropped the trend a little bit to, I'll say 1.4. That compares to 1.5 in December. But comparing to July of last year. So this is where the expectation of where we are with respect to credits from the signatories is kind of lowering the trend line and lower penalties as well. Operating expenses. Actually, for July, we were a little bit lower than where we were in June. That dropped the trend line a little bit to 1.6, very close to not that far ahead of where we were at the end of December, and a little bit higher than 1.5 that we had in July. But again, this one, like the other funds, the inflation is hitting us a little bit. CapEx. We're at 84. We're thinking we'll be at 84% the budget. Right now, we're at 75. And that compares to 53 a year ago and 43 2 years ago. So we're up a little bit, and the rate of capital spending will go down as through the remainder of the year now. City division. $155,000 favorable if income for the month. Income year to date is $150,000 better. Full year, we think will be $1.8 million better. So where we are year to date is pretty much favorable on the operating revenue side, not too unfavorable on the operating expense side. So it didn't erode it as much. We're getting 68,000 on higher non-operating stuff, and I think that was more along the lines of project reimbursement, and interest expense was up as well, so that helps as we get into the interest earnings. Cash flows 58,000 higher, 53,000 year to date better, $536,000 of favorable variance expected for the year. The variance year to date is attributable to higher cash from operations, higher interest income, offset a little bit by higher CapEx as well. Debt service coverage ratio on the city, like the 2.17. That's better than our budget, better than our internal. We think we'll finish not as high as 2.17, but getting close to 2. Operating ratio 1.99. Again, that's better than the 2 targets. And we think that'll drop a little bit to 1.71, but still leave us in a good position. Cash on hand, 260.1. And we think we're going to finish the year at 295.2, and that'll be better than a target of 180. Operating revenues to forecast, we're at, let's just say 100%. So we're pretty much dead even in terms of operating revenues, pretty much dead even in operating expenses. And year-to-date CapEx, we're a little bit higher by 1.2 percentage points. In terms of operating revenues, we're just actually a few $100 higher. We think we're going to finish a little bit below in terms of the operating revenues for the year. Operating expenses were kind of a little bit above right now. We think, though, at the end of the year that will be pretty well better than budget for the year. CapEx spending is 3.7 versus 3.7. It looks like that'll finish 10.6 versus 11, and then unrestricted cash balance, this would be almost, or 16.7 versus 16.6. And we think we'll be at around 18.9 in terms of total unrestricted cash balances. Operating revenues, the trend line went up a little bit from 4041 to 4055. It's up from December and up from July of last year, reflecting rate increases that were put into effect on the 1st of January. So we're doing well with operating revenue. And the operating expenses, well, pretty much this is almost where the trend line and the expenses are pretty much even out, 2.1 versus almost 2.1 in December. So it's kind of flatlined out in terms of operating expenses. So that looks pretty good. CapEx, well, we think we'll be at 95% by the time the end of the year comes around. We're sitting at 33% now. So we've got a lot to do to catch up for the rest of the year. Recap scorecard. Suburban water, well, that's 14 out of 14. Cities, 13 out of 14. And we talked about some of the variances along the way. Suburban wastewater, 6, but in a number of cases, they're pretty close to the target. So I'm not really concerned that the scorecard is it might be saying it's worse than it really is. And that is it. Questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. You said some, I think days cash on hand was down because of you invested the money. If you needed that money, you could get it with a penalty.
Actually not even a penalty. The maturity dates are pretty much like 60, 90 days. So
Okay.
there isn't anything that we put in there now that's longer than that. So getting at it real easy.
You got it.
And that's why I said it's kind of misleading when I say the
Yeah.
cash is not as good when it is.
Thank you.
Why was the suburban wastewater revenue so low
We're down
for
because,
July?
it was a lower, I'll call it lower industrial, lower municipal revenues during the month. And as we go through the forecast, there's going to be some credits coming into the signatories that will be reflected, which will also hold revenue down as well.
Those credits were paid in July,
Yes.
right? So that's the year-end true up that for 2021 that gets reflected in 2022.
Yeah. That someday we'd like to do adjusts.
The changes that we made today for the tapping fees, will that be reflected in the next forecast or next month? Or?
Actually, the forecast has already been lowered somewhat. Is it lowered enough? We'll have to take a look. But I believe the budget for the year was close to $1 million, and we're now down in the $600,000 area. But we'll have to take a look and make sure that it doesn't warrant going down a little bit more, and then make sure that we roll that same thinking into the budget as well.
Any other questions?
Hey, Ed, I've just got one question, if I may. If you add up the cash on hand across all of the 3 areas, what's that total?
Oh, that's a good question. I know in the board pack, there was cash and investments, and I have to get to that. So we're talking altogether unrestricted cash of $26.5 million.
Okay. That's a running total or end of year expected?
No, that's actually where we are year to date. So
Gotcha.
considering that I've said that the end of year balances will be a little bit higher. Let's take a look. We think they'll be in the neighborhood of 66.7 million.
Okay. Sorry, that was just to help me frame it. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Deb.
Okay.
Moving on, monthly system operations overview. Digital board package pages 131 to 136. And the July report was attached to our package hard copy.
Thanks, Brian. So in front of you, you have the July operations report. Even in the summer months, we are still up on water production, both the Allentown and suburban division. That's including our surface water surface water sources and well production, and also includes the water that we transfer from Allentown to suburban divisions to get interconnect. Wastewater is still pretty consistent with what we typically see this time of the year. We only had about 2.38 inches of rain. We did receive one NOV, which was for the SSO at the pretreatment plant, which I explained last meeting. And we had 2 main breaks, 1 injury accident, and that was during a main break where an employee was in the hole and went to swing a sledgehammer. His elbow hit one of the mini excavator arms. So he had a little bit of injury on his elbow there. Just wanted to make note that the Applewood emergency interconnection went online in July, which was installed earlier in June, but it officially was permitted and went online in the middle of July. And once again, that is to supplement some of the water demand if need be during the time that Reservoir 1 is offline. As of today, it has not activated, so which is a very good thing, but it is there in case we do need it for water demand. So I have, does anyone have any specific questions?
Questions? All right, thank you. And moving on to staff comments. Any staff comments?
I just have one brief one, and going back to the earlier topic around tapping fees, to recognize Ed and his tenacity over the last 2 years to get that project done. And you know, I did a lot of the talking around the policies because that's where my focus was, but Ed and his team putting that together after a fairly long period of time of not calculating them was a pretty big task. And next up are the city tapping fees and the suburban water rate study. So we keep this guy pretty busy with trying to get caught up on processes and processes.
Yeah, it was good that we kind of did some more research on the tapping fees, because it ultimately led to the discussion today of policies that I think really needed to be revamped. And now I feel a whole lot more comfortable about the numbers and the basis for the numbers being in line with the way it should be. So.
And so do we. All right, thank you.
That's all I have.
Solicitor comments.
No comments.
Any public comments on any topics?
No comment here, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Sue, Jane. All right. Other public comments? All right, at this point in time, we're going to adjourn. We're going to reopen at let's make it 1:30 under executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel issues. We are okay. I'm sorry.
Just to be clear, the board members who are on, there's a separate Zoom invite just for that for the board members.
Do both Linda and Kevin have the new information? The information that was provided. Okay. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.